Welcome to Right on the Mark with your host, myself, Mark Young. Today we're going to talk a little about table tennis, also known as ping pong. Uh, I like to think that that was a big part of my childhood growing up. I want to say, late 70s, early teenage years. Those are some good years. A lot of competition, friendly competitions, I'll say to start out with. Uh, here or there, you'd play against your cousins, your brothers, some of your siblings. If nobody was around, you could even fold the ping pong table up and just practice playing against yourself. That was always fun, but one of the things that I always enjoyed was friendly competition of ping pong. And I can remember going back playing my brother Mike and playing some of his friends. Joe, I used to call him from Italy. He was a good ping pong player. He would put a lot of Italian spin on the ball, as I used to call it. And then I kind of broadened myself by going out and playing with my cousins, playing with my neighbors, and things like that. My next door neighbor, Todd, was really good at it. He had a cousin named John who was really, really good at it. I think his cousin John actually played semi pro tennis. So he was really good at ping pong. It was hard to beat him. But I always enjoyed the challenge. There was a lot of action going on back then. I mean, you could play pool, you could play ping pong, a lot of outdoor, indoor sports as well. And it usually took place in the summertime. Just some friendly games we would play either outdoor or indoor in somebody's basement where you had a lot of room to just play ping pong. And winning was a big part of it because you got bragging rights. I can remember back as a kid that you always wanted to brag about something. Man, you're good at this, you're good at that, but I'm the best at ping pong. That was always fun to say. Yeah, I really enjoyed those years, but man, I would spend hours and hours and hours just practicing and practicing and then waiting for my brother to get home from college and then play him over the weekend, only to find out that he would beat me pretty bad. And then I found out that he was practicing at college. So yeah, a lot of good times back then. The we played pool a lot. The billiards table we had down in our basement as well. So I kind of try to play a lot of both just to keep myself entertained through some of the lean years. Whether it was raining outside or whether people were going away to camp, you had to keep yourself entertained. There wasn't much else to do. So I'd like to say that I was probably above average, maybe way above average as a ping pong player. So I would welcome the challenge of playing anyone new because, as you know, if you're playing against one person all the time, you're only going to be as good as that one person that you're playing with. I remember playing with one of my roommates at college, AJ, and he wasn't very good at ping pong, so I showed him a few tricks, and we just kept playing day after day after day. And after a few months, he was just about as good as me, so it was hard beating him because that's all you played against was him. So I always liked playing against different people of my generation, not too much younger, not too much older, just people around my age. Always welcome the challenge to play them. This goes back to even whenever I was a child. I'd say maybe geez, I don't know, 5 or 6. I remember going to places. My dad would take me, and I'd see ping pong tables, pool tables, some clubs in Menneson that I would look at that we would go visit and things like that. And I'd see people playing, and I was always involved in that. I'd always like watch them, sit down, have a Coke, and just watch them and see the camaraderie and everything that they were talking about, and just having a really good time hanging out at the club, watching them play pool or ping pong or darts or whatever they would do at the club back then. And when I got into my teens, I started. My dad got us a pool table and a ping pong table, so I started to practice a lot on ping pong. So then I started to get my own paddles, and then I started getting custom-made paddles, and then I would get buy a lot of ping pong balls, and I would practice spiking and smashing the ball on the other side. And then there were times that I'd really get upset and throw my paddle. Throw the paddle at the wall is always a good thing. Always gets out your frustrations. So that was always fun to do. And I'd play a lot of my brother's friends, my friends, and I like to think that I won more than I lost. Like I said, I'd like to think that I was a lot better than average player. I can remember having tournaments growing up as a kid, just in my close neighborhood, whether it's me, my brother, my neighbor Todd. his brother Joe, my brother's friend Joe, things of that nature. And we would have tournaments, round robin tournaments, and we would play what seemed like all day long. On a rainy day, we'd be in the basement and you could find us. If we weren't at the swimming pool, we were playing ping pong. That's for sure. Those were the days. And you took it hard. You took it serious. And I remember people practicing and practicing. And then you'd schedule. You would schedule these competitions saying, well, I'm playing Joe tonight at 8 o'clock. And then the winner plays tomorrow at 8 a.m. and so on. And, the winner actually got a belt. We actually made up a ping pong belt. We got that just from watching TV and watching wrestling. And always the champions always had a belt. So you had some type of belt if you won. So if you won the tournament, you were the so-called champion. So you got the belt and you wore it around until the next tournament. And part of that was to keep the belt as long as you could. That was probably the most important thing. Was everyone was coming after you after that. They were going after every angle. They were trying to run you out of town, basically, is what the running joke used to be. Is once you won the belt, you never wanted to play anyone else because there's always a chance that you could lose that belt. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I can remember making a paddle, and basically I just got an old broken paddle, and I taped it up with some black electrical tape that my father had at home, and I had some pretty good spin on it. So I taped it up again. So I had like two layers of electrical tape with grooves on it. So man, when I hit that ping pong ball, it really, really curved in the air and hooked on the table, and people couldn't know how to keep the ball on the table. It gave it some awesome spin, and man, I tell you what, I like to think I was unstoppable with my Black Beauty paddle. So I took that on the road. As a matter of fact, I took that to my cousins, and back then seemed like everybody had a ping pong table. You had a pool table, you had a ping pong table. Some people had a pinball machine. So we'd go around. You always wanted that arcade in your house, so you didn't have to go out. But I'd go over to my cousin's house and play ping pong. And at first, I'd start out with a regular house paddle, and then after that, I'd change to my Black Beauty paddle. So I'm playing my cousins, Rick, Joe, Kevin, Jake. We're having a really good time. And then we started having tournaments. And then that's when it all started. It all started, we're going to have a tournament. And the tournament guy, the one that wins the tournament is going to win the belt. So we had a belt over at my cousin's house and would play a tournament where it was single elimination or double elimination. It depended how many people were there and how long we wanted it to last. So we'd always play and play and play, and then we'd go to tournament time, and we always had a twist with it as well. So not only if you were the winner, you also won the belt, but you also had the bragging rights. So you had the bragging rights probably for as long as maybe a month until we met again to play the tournament. And as always, we had a saying that if you lost the belt to somebody, you had to hand it over to the winner, and you also had to say, "You are the better man." Which really hurt more than handing a belt over. Telling somebody that they are the better man is like a term that you never wanted to use because you're admitting defeat and you're admitting that the other guy is better than you, which back then everybody thought they were the best. And then once in a while, somebody would come along new to the group and they would just come in and wipe you out because you didn't know their style of play. So this leads up to one instance with my cousin's neighbor, Lou. Lou would call himself the King of Ping, and you just couldn't beat Lou. He would come down to my cousin's basement and just wipe us all out to a point to where we says you weren't even invited anymore because he had a different style of play. He had his own paddle. He played with his friends and his cousins and neighbors and that sort. And he actually would grease his table. He would actually put some type of woolite on it or some type of slick cleaning surface solution where he would hit the ball and it would spike so hard and it would slide right off the table. You wouldn't even have a chance to return it. So so we kind of banned Lou for a while just because of his antics, but he really was a good ping pong player. To this day, I bet you he could still remember that. That's one childhood memory. There's many other childhood memories, but I remember taking a show on the road. I would go on vacation with my cousins, and this one particular time we ended up in Hershey. We toured the Hershey factory. We went to the Hershey amusement park, and we stayed in Hershey at I think it was the Hershey Lodge. And in the rec room, they had a ping pong table, and we looked at each other and said, "Whoa, this is going to be good." So there were 6 or 7 of us playing ping pong, and they had two ping pong tables going around at the same time. So you're able to play 2 games at the same time, and you're able to go through a round robin tournament a little bit more faster. But I can remember making the championship match with my cousin Joe. And, we always played to 21. Whitewash was 7-0, 11-2, and 18-3. But 21 was the game. So, if you went to 21 and you didn't, you were leading by 2, you won the game. From what I can remember, you won the game if you were leading by 2 and you hit 21. So I can remember being 3 or 4 points up on my cousin Joe for the championship with an audience in Hershey. That was huge. So people started to gather around. Now, when I say people, I'll say kids in the arcade were gathering around. In this particular case, there was teenage girls watching us, and my cousins were there, my aunt and uncle were there, and some other people were there watching us. And I want to say I was up by 3 or 4 points, trying to close Joe out, just so I could win the belt and bragging rights for the trip home. And all of a sudden, I smashed the ball and spiked it, got the point, but we cracked the ball. I actually cracked the ball. So I says, where are we going to get a new ping pong ball at? And my cousin Joe just happened to have one in his pocket. Don't know where he got it. Don't know where it came from. Don't know if he brought it from home, if he got it from the arcade manager. No idea where it came from, but it came out of his pocket, his front hip pocket. And to this day, I could picture that. He pulls it out and goes, "Mark, we could keep playing. I have a ball." I'm like, "No, where is this from? We cannot use this ball. Is it regulated? Is it an official ping pong ball? Can we do it?" And after that, I didn't score a point. Joe went on to run the table about 5 or 6 points in a row. I lost the championship. And to this day, I blame that loaded ball that he had in his pocket, probably brought all the way back from Monessen. That really stung me that day. But, that wasn't the worst part. You might think that was the worst part, but let me tell you something. The worst part was after the game, all the teenage kids that were watching us, particularly the girls, they all clapped for Joe, which really, really hurt. So I could remember them leaving me at the ping pong table singing a song because I'm like, "No, this isn't fair. It was a loaded ball." So I was going to throw the gauntlet down again, saying challenge game because I protest. But they said, "Nope, I win, you lose." So I could remember them singing a song as I stand there. And it came out of Greece because back then Greece was huge. I want to say it was probably in the late 70s, maybe 77, 78. And they were singing a song, and they're like, "Stranded at the ping pong table, branded a fool. What will Mark do Tuesday at school?" Because that was a week or 2 before we had school, and we started school on a Tuesday. And if you remember the lyrics from Grease back in 1978, it was one of those John Travolta songs that said, "Stranded at the drive-in, branded a fool. What will they do Monday at school?" But, my cousins put a twist on it and said Tuesday at school because I think we were starting Tuesday of the following week. So yeah, so that's something that we talk about often whenever we get together. There's a lot of fun times we talk about, but definitely ping pong was one of them. And I kind of took this to the next level. Actually, I joined the ping pong team back probably in the mid '80s. I joined the Nippa League. Some of my cousins joined the Nippa League as well. They played softball, but I was on the ping pong team. So Nippa had a ping pong team. Sometimes we played ping pong, sometimes we played beer pong. But it didn't matter. We played ping pong. And I like to say that I was really, really good at ping pong and would play competitions against other clubs. The Polish club, the Italian club, the Ukraine club, Sokols. Would go to Denora, would go to Charleroi, would go to Belvarna, would play other clubs and would actually have a team that would play ping pong. So that was actually fun. And this all stemmed from just growing up playing ping pong as a kid, and then even playing in college. I remember having a dorm competition with ping pong. Back then, we had a lot of competitions with the dorms. I mean, you had arm wrestling competitions, you had pool competitions, billiards competitions, I should say. A lot of competitions and ping pong. I can remember making it to the top 5 or 6 in ping pong, and then some of these kids just from out of state and across state, maybe came from Philly or whatever, but just beating us really bad just because we haven't seen their style of play. You had a certain style that you played every day, but these people that came from out of town or out of state, they were hard to beat because you just didn't see that style. You didn't travel as much back then. You traveled around the Mon Valley, but you didn't go out of state that often. But yeah, I can remember playing Nippa ping pong. Nippa had also a league of their own. They played darts, they played billiards, they played a lot of games back then. And of course, it was a club where you could drink and eat and just a cool place to hang out, just to show your skills off. Because after high school, you took a break in the summer, then you went to college, and in between colleges you'd have a job, but you always came back to playing ping pong. It was always all about ping pong. But yeah, those are some really good years. Man, those times really did fly by. I can remember maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, just getting together with my cousins, and my kids are older now, so I always tell them these stories about playing ping pong and pool and arcade games and stuff like that. And I always like to tell them how good I was back then. But this particular instance, we were back in town for a gathering in Menneson, and just happened to be back in my cousin's basement with the ping pong table. Yes, the ping pong table. Didn't have my Black Beauty paddle, but we did have a bunch of house paddles, and we had balls, and we just picked up a game. Kind of just picked up where we left off. So, there's a bunch of 40-year-olds playing ping pong for the first time in probably 20 to 30 years, and we picked up a little friendly competition. And I was glad to say and happy to say that I did run the table. I did beat everyone. And I did prove a point to my oldest son, Sean, saying that I was always the better man in ping pong. I mean, I would hit the ball behind my back, forearm smash, backhand smash, a high drop spin serve. I would even, be able to lift up my leg and hit the ball over the net, and just to get a point any way I can, just to show off. So, now it's more of just a show off sport than it is competition, but we always have those years of going back to when we took it really tough. We took it hard where you wanted to have bragging rights, because part of it was you were going to see them for a long, long time. Your friends, your family, your neighbors, your cousins, and you always wanted to have something good to say. And to this day, I could always say I was the better man. Well, that about wraps it up for Right on the Mark with your host, myself, Mark Young. I'll see you next time. Take care.